Great games at your table. I'm Jonathan Elbin, and this is NycosRPG. I've been asked this question a dozen times, and each time I get asked, it just sort of makes me laugh. Because when you think about it, how can you save a TTRPG? You think about the way a video game might be saved, where you simply get to a save location, hit the save button, and the game is now held in stasis for you to continue to play at a later time. But when I hear the phrase, can I save a game? I know they're talking about how do I keep a catastrophe from happening and my players ceasing to even be friends with each other. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG, and we are going to be talking about this very subject. And I'm going to give you several recommendations on how you can prevent the worst from happening in your game session. And we're going to talk about some things that simply can't be saved, and we will talk about those as well. But before we get there, if you like our materials, make sure you click all the buttons down below, because they help us to allow the algorithm to know who our fans are. We greatly appreciate you being here. If you have any comments or commentary, please feel free to include them in our chat here on Twitch. And if not, make sure you leave like and comment below on YouTube, because I'll be able to respond. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Alrighty, so one of the biggest challenges in roleplay games is that there are players who have become familiar with the game mechanic and are curious about how one player might fare against another player in that environment. And inevitably, one or two or 10 of your players will ask, hey, can we duel each other? And what they're really asking is for you to be a judge, jury, and executioner of their attempts to destroy each other in a game. And the mechanics of a role-playing game are not set up for that purpose. There are plenty of shooter games, other fighting style games that are in the abstract that certainly would allow players to engage each other in such a fashion. But I can say that one of the greatest challenges in a role-play environment is that if you allow for player versus player functions in your role-play game, you're going to be causing yourself worlds of damage in the long term, because players will tend to either see their participation as a means of determining a pecking order, or they will become adversarial against one another in the mechanics of the game, or worse than either of those, they'll end up blaming you as a co-conspirator, as it were, to let them determine these things. It's not too different from two siblings in a family arguing whether or not mama loves you better or whether mama loves me better, and you don't want to get into those situations. So my recommendation as a professional game master is prevent PvP actions if at all possible. I generally make that a session 0 conversation with brand new players, so that they will understand that the very mechanism of player versus player interaction is, to me, antithetical to the very concepts of roleplay. This concept, therefore, will provide you with a solid ground, a solid location with which to keep players from asking for this kind of an interaction, and therefore damaging your credibility, perhaps, or worse, making it so that they that none of them. Now we're going to talk about the brass tacks of what happens when a player group is starting to feel the impending doom of some form of creative chaos. And there are many types of irritants that can play into the destruction of your games group, and it's really important to be able to figure out what you are dealing with in terms of the discord between the players. And there can be as many different possible sources as there are players in a game session, so it's sometimes difficult to figure out what they are. Some examples of irritants in a game session can be the inequity of time between one player and another. And this can be real or it can be perceived. I've actually gone to the point of utilizing a timer that the players can see, a sand glass timer, so that they can see that no one player is getting more or less time than any other in terms of gameplay. It's not easy all the time, and sometimes it can be cumbersome and interfering, but just realize that a method for identifying the challenging irritants is a way to prevent them from becoming explosive. In all candor, most problems that occur in a game session happen over time. They're not generally a one and done. It's not normally one interaction that causes players grief. It's more than likely going to be a series or a bunch of them that work together to cause the problem. So by identifying and clarifying what the difficulties are, you can help to circumvent them, or at least avoid them, or even better, eliminate the basis for them. Another example of an irritant in a game session can be one player's attitude about the game. We just recently had a situation in one of my campaigns where my players civilly just disconnected and separated from the game session. And it took actually actively pursuing what the irritants were to make them go away. But it was a necessary issue, and I appreciate the honesty and the civility of all the players involved in the conflict, because it is a hard thing to lose players, and it's an impossible thing when all of the players are having challenges with one another and you can't identify what's particularly going wrong. In this case, it was a style issue between one player and another, and it was also a disconnect between the player and the framework, the mechanism itself, because the player was perceiving of the actions as being adversarial against them individually, when it was really an in-character challenge, but it was not very well transmitted in that fashion, and so it took some actual cajoling to get them to work it out. But thankfully, we were able to identify both the irritant and mechanistic problem on one side and the psychosocial issue on the other, and bring both of them to a closure by identifying and recognizing and discussing both of them openly. And I greatly appreciate everybody that was involved with that, because we were able to return to the game session. And it may be one of the very first times that I've actually accomplished what I've always tried to do. And so it was very kind of exciting to see it happen, because what needed to happen did, which was we identified the irritants and several of the other steps that are coming up as well. In the game session, if there are players that are going to be getting to the point of being upset with each other, to the point where in game there's going to be difficulties, ensure that somebody in the NPC crowd, or perhaps even a player character, goes through the effort of actually in story alerting the authorities in the local area. Now, this isn't always opportune, and sometimes it's impossible, but the idea is that to give clarity to the players that such an action is going to be extreme and will have consequences. By utilizing the in-game authorities, you tend to help to temper the situation in the story. Now, of course, this does no good if the conflict is player versus player, which of course we talked about in the last slide. So in this case, we're actually talking about meta play, when the individual players are carrying forward conflicts that aren't necessarily justified in play, and they're just going to be causing trouble for no justifiable reason. In that case, you will want to use the local authorities in the game to give the situation gravitas. It doesn't necessarily mean that anybody has to be, separated or incarcerated or any of those extreme things, but just the awareness that local authorities may get involved can help. Of course, in a role-playing game where the mechanics will allow for the bad guys in the situation or the people in error to actually do damage to one another before the authorities can react. This is of course problematic. So you have to be judicious about this because you don't want it to become a situation where you as the game master are pulling down a hammer on something that should have been handled between players before it ever got to this level. But the next is that if this is a situation that has occurred, say, between game sessions, that the players in game had a beef and that beef is now tenderizing, so to speak, between game sessions, definitely try to downplay the dramatics. And that fundamentally means getting the individuals to converse at first with you and then with each other, because you want to undermine the unspoken angst, because individuals who are having a conflict in a game session generally are going to be having issues with their own ego and will have an inability to back down. And so it's a matter of you as a storyteller and a game master speaking with the players out of context of the game, out of the environment, and downplaying and destroying the method and the game economy issues that are going to be utilized in the conflict should one occur. So downplay the dramatics, get them to be speaking more rationally. And I know that there are those who are game masters who say we just ignore this stuff and let the players tough it out on their own, and some game masters even go so far as to say let them PvP it. But in my estimation, gameplay should be enjoyable and fun, and when it gets to the point where the drama is now real and visceral and mean-spirited, it needs to be shut down. So we will perhaps have a conversation about that in the comments section. But if you how in your system, how would you downplay the dramatics? In my mechanism, you simply call each player individually or even collectively and say, this is what seems to be going on from my standpoint. Am I getting the right message from you? Is this what you're wanting to resolve, or is there something more that I don't understand? Biggest challenges when you're dealing with a player versus player conflict is that often there really isn't anything mechanistically between them that has set them off. It's just that the irritants that we've spoken about before haven't been resolved, and we haven't really gotten a handle on what is going on between the players or what the players' challenges are with the game session. In the case of the recent conflict, there was actually issues with my style as a game master, and sometimes my assumption of what players comprehend and understand about the game becomes too abstract, and the players get confused and therefore are acting on what they think is the right mechanism without realizing that I've diverged from where they are headed. And so it's a matter of opening a creative conversation and saying, hey, there is a challenge here. We need to figure out what it is, and I want to bring it to a close. So how can I help, and what is it that I've allowed to occur that is causing the consternation? In certain cases, it's nothing that you could have done. It's simply the players and their own interactions, and they need to be able to face one another and resolve that. But nonetheless, it's a matter of getting that conversation to occur between the players. In the case of this last circumstance, I actually had player A and player B talk about the subject without me in the room, so to speak, because it really wasn't an issue of what I had done between them, but it was that they were both having differing concepts of what should or should not be happening in the game, and I had facilitated a lack of understanding. So it really is important it's really important that you as a game master foster fruitful feedback between the players and with yourself on a constant ongoing basis, because these kinds of challenges sometimes crop up time and again because the players are still not square or still not understanding what their parameters are and may or may not need to be have that refreshed in their minds. So it's important to make sure you're getting feedback and understanding about it from both players' circumstances and your own. And this can be as big as an entire group-wide conversation. So make sure that you have debriefs and opportunities for players to bring up what they might have in conflict session over session so that you avoid problems with this going on. In addition to the obvious feedback, you also want to make sure that you're constantly will checking yourself as a storyteller. It's important that you get feedback on an ongoing basis on whether or not you're assisting the players to accomplish that which they want to accomplish, or whether you're actually causing them difficulties as well. So constantly look for clarity between your players to ensure that you're giving and getting the best feedback possible so that these conflicts can be handled well in advance of any difficulty and can put the players back on even keel session over session. I've been doing this for 50 years, and I can tell you that every group has difficulties and challenges. As a matter of fact, I will be doing an episode here in the future that delineates the classic player tropes that you as a game master will see in every games group going forward as well, to kind of give you a heads up on what to expect over the months, years, and decades that you. Alrighty, and as parting shots, I want to thank everybody who has been watching my videos. I've been at this for about, I think we're coming up on our 7th or 8th year, and we have more than 700 videos, and I invite you to take a look at as many of them as you want. They are set into playlists, and I recommend you take a look at several of them. If you are a game master and are interested in learning more about how to become a game master and how to develop it, I know that there have been several of the veteran game masters over time who have reached the end of their pursuits. But I want to talk about games from the standpoint of how they can improve your life more than just improving your game play. So for more information on that, check out NycosRPG.info to understand the world of Nykos, and to understand the game mechanics of our system, check out NycosRPG.com and go to the Play Now section. There is a fast play version of the game available for download, as well as persona sheets and community identification sheets so that the storyteller can start building his games right away. Thank you again for being here, and we will see you in the next episode. I'm Jonathan Albin, NycosRPG, and we will see you next time.